Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz test postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 429. I was white here, and I kicked off with e4. And my opponent played c5. So after a few moves, I play the normal moves of the open Sicilian. He goes d6, I go d4. Takes, and now he plays the somewhat unusual move knight c6. You see, the main move is knight f6, which forces white to do something about defending the e-pawn. And normally the knight to c3 move is played blocking the c-pawn. But when knight to c6 is played, it is possible, and it's one of the choices here, to just play c4 and set up a Maroczy bind. And because this is an opening type that I've been trying to learn, I decided to go ahead with that. You could also just play knight c3 and get you could transpose right back into a classical Sicilian if black plays knight f6. But c4 sets up the Maroczy bind, and now g6. So we get a typical kind of setup here. Let's see, was there other moves in this position? Knight f6 is the other way to play it. But yeah, just following normal development. Of course, the bishop here and the knight here are going to put immediate pressure on this hole on d4, which is characteristic of the Maroczy bind. And so what's the main move here? Knight c3 continuing to develop. I decided to develop my bishop with bishop e3. Not a bad idea. I think I made some mistakes in this opening, but they come a little bit later. So after bishop g7, you can see we transpose back into kind of a mainline position. Knight c3. We just got here by a bit of a unusual move order. Knight f6. And now bishop e2 is the main move here, and that's really what I should have played. Instead I played f3. Yeah, there is an idea. Let's check this out. Oh, bishop e2 stops the knight from coming to this square as well. There is an idea of the knight coming to the square g4 to harass the bishop. And f3 stops that idea, but bishop e2 also stops it, and that's the main move here. And this is maybe the first of my inaccurate moves. I would say starting here, I don't play the Maroczy bind in the correct fashion, or at least not in the fashion I intended to. But basically, it's more of a positional setup. So I should be thinking of moves like bishop e2 and castling kingside. That should be in my game plan. Whereas moves like f3, queen d2, and castling queenside, which I play, don't really fit in with this Maroczy bind setup. They're more the kind of moves you would play if you're going for opposite side castling and pawn storms. But, well, with the Maroczy bind, you're usually going for a more positional setup. So this kind of starts me, this move f3, starts me down the wrong path here. Queen d2. I'm just so used to playing these moves in the Sicilian because I almost always play this kind of attacking setup, some kind of attacking setup, not always the English setup with the queen and the bishop here, but sometimes the bishop g5. But generally lines where white castles queenside and goes for the attack. So let's see, after knight g7, we're basically out of the opening book. Let's just look at this from the point of view of the notation tab here. So he is putting extra pressure on this d4 point by opening up lines. And here's where I decided to castle queenside. Now, it's not a bad move per se. So you'll see the evaluation still stays in favor of white. It's just that I've kind of chosen a different plan than what I intended. What I intended to do was to learn how to play the Maroczy bind, which is more of a positional kind of setup. And instead what I've gotten into is a typical kind of Sicilian with opposite side castlings and pawn storms. That kind of stuff. Okay, so knight d to e5. This knight reroutes to a good square. And I play king b1. Also, you see these are still good moves, but I'll show you where it starts to go downhill. Because, yeah, it's right here. So I've secured my king. I've castled on the queenside. I've got all my pieces pointed at my opponent's king. I need to start a pawn storm. I should play the move h4 here. The chess engine also has some ideas about various knight maneuvers, knight d5 and knight b3. Knight b3 is interesting too, kicking the queen. But really, I think the best approach here is just to get on with the pawn storm. But as I was saying, I was still thinking, I was trying to play this kind of positional Maroczy bind type of setup that Chess Explained talks about. So I'm playing other moves. So rook c1, shoring up the knight here. b6. And you'll see this is starting to give away my advantage. Although black is making some kind of peculiar moves here. His queen is a bit short on squares after this, and his knight is a bit loose here. And this opens up some tactics. Now, I play the move, so knight b3 right here is pretty interesting, actually. Kicking the queen and forcing it to a6. Something I should have considered right after seeing this move b6, which blocks the retreat of the queen. Okay, but I played the move knight d5, and I think that is already a mistake. Let's see, is this where it goes right? Yeah, knight d5 is a blunder. So if you want to take a minute and see if you can figure out why knight d5 is a blunder. I noticed it right after I moved. But of course, it'd be good if you can spot these things before you move. So here's a question for you. Why is knight d5 a blunder? Why don't you pause the video and see if you can figure it out? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. So knight d5 exposes the queens to each other, so a queen trade can occur. Queen takes, and I have to take back with the bishop. And then my knight is loose. This knight is hanging here. So instead of his knight being loose, it's my knight. So he just wins a piece this way. So knight d5 was really a pretty terrible move. My opponent played e6 instead of taking advantage of my mistake, and I just had to go back to c3. I had noticed by this time that I needed to do something about that idea of losing my knight here. Now my opponent plays bishop a6, and I go b3, just shoring up my pawns here, and then he makes a real mistake here, and the game goes downhill for black after this. He plays the move b5, and it's just pretty straightforward that I can take the pawn and fork those two pieces, although he didn't play that the best way after that. What's interesting is it's better for me to actually exchange first on c6. So I didn't play this, but if I were to exchange here, knight c6, knight takes, and then take the pawn, now there's a fork here, and this knight doesn't have any targets, so there's no easy way for black to escape the fork. So that's the most accurate way to play that tactic. I played takes right away, and now this knight is under attack and the bishop is under attack, so it's a fork. But the knight can escape. He didn't play this, but the knight can escape by taking on d4, a common way to get out of one of these double attacks. If one of the pieces that's under attack can escape and take another piece at the same time, now black is momentarily a piece up and two pieces are hanging, but I can only take one of them. Let's see, does it matter? Yeah, the engine rates them both as about even. I could take either the bishop or the knight. Say I take the bishop, trying to trap the knight can just drop back to c6. And, well, I've gained a pawn. I have a good position here, but it's not the best I could have gotten out of that tactic. So that's an interesting point, that this intermediate move, exchanging the knight first, makes that pawn fork much more powerful, because then the knight cannot escape with taking another piece. Okay, I played c takes b5 immediately. He took back with the bishop, so this just gives up a whole piece, and from here on out, I'm just up a piece, and there's not a lot going on. He tries to get some activity with his remaining pieces, but it's just not sufficient. And I just play ordinary moves here, trading off his pieces when I get the chance. And he goes in for this crazy attack, but it's not working. There's nothing going on here. And once again, the queens are exposed. If we back up, yeah, knight takes c6. I mean, his rook was protected. He just has to take back with the knight. But he's down a whole rook at this point. So is that true? No, he's just down a piece. But anyway, I have a good position. After knight takes, the knight defends the queen. So he's not losing the queen in that line. Knight takes rook, queen takes queen, knight takes queen. And he would have a rook, a knight, and a bishop, and I would have a rook, a knight, and two bishops. So certainly a winning advantage, but he makes it a lot easier by giving up his queen here. So I take it, and he gets in a check, but there's just not enough going on here. He could try and grab a bishop here, but instead he just threw away his remaining piece, probably in frustration, and and so that's how the game ended. He resigned here. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, particularly the opening part. So remember that if you want to play the Maroczy bind setup, remember to castle on the king side. I went back and checked out the two games that I had looked at recently in the Maroczy bind. Yeah, in both cases, white is castling king side. So and so when I castled queen side, I really should have switched plans and gone back to my traditional pawn storm attack against the opposite castled king. The king castled on the opposite side. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.